Krzysztof Chytła will be talking about building on test strategy. Now, Krzysztof is a leader, speaker, and coach. Over the last 13 years, he's gained professional experience in multiple international projects across the domains of web, mobile, telecommunications, consumer entertainment, and online retail. It's been an adventurous journey from a junior tester to department manager. Well, it always is, isn't it? And Krzysztof is passionate about people and making them successful in the world of software engineering. He strongly believes that a successful work environment is built on mutual trust, competence, and teamwork. Privately, these days, let me tell you, Krzysztof does whiskey tasting more than he does hands-on software testing. But my understanding is, Krzysztof, that one does not affect the other. So building on test strategy, Krzysztof, off you go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Rafał, for this awesome introduction. Yeah, those are complementary activities and one does not exclude the other. I promised to share some experiences about test strategy, so here we go. I'll start with tip number one. It's very important to set the context for whatever activities you're undertaking professionally or even privately. We've all had those conversations with our wives and partners. So following the advice from Simon Sinek, I always start with why rather than what, because we always can get to the details of what is actually needed, but the context, the reason why we're doing things is really important. Imagine that you're one of those people in the picture. So what do you see? What would you tell the others that you saw? If you were in the upper left corner, you'd probably see a forehead. To the right, you'd see an ear. Even more to the right, you'd see the rear of something that's probably an animal. Imagine that you've never seen an elephant in your life and you'd be asked to describe exactly, precisely what you saw to the others so that they could paint it or build something similar. And this is very much the case we're facing on our software development projects on a daily basis. So unless we have the full picture, we can fall into the traps of making false assumptions and therefore deliver not what is expected because we don't know why it is expected. So this is a simple framework of 5 W's, the why, the what, the who, the when, and where. So let me try to apply it right away to the presentation. So I'm here because I love sharing knowledge and I believe that the experiences I had over the last decade could be beneficial to your projects, because if one thing comes to my mind after years of observation is that projects have a lot in common, even though they differ very much depending on the domain and the tasks at hand. So I'm going to do this in a form of a presentation. This is going to be a case study, and I prepared something like 10 challenges, 6 tips, and 7 recipes that hopefully will resonate with you and help you resolve some of the challenges that you have on your particular projects. And the test strategy will be the platform. It will be the foundation I'll be building on. This is me. Rafa already provided an excellent presentation, so I'm not going to delay any further. When we have approximately 50 minutes left, because at the very end, I'd like to leave some room for your questions, which I would happily answer. And we're doing this online due to specific circumstances. Honestly, this is the first time for me. It's a bit difficult because I don't get to see the audience. I don't get to interact with you live, but let's see how this goes. You can probably remember the time when you joined a new company, a new project, change department in your current organization, and you were faced with new environment, new challenges, new projects, new people. Probably you had the feeling of being lost. If somebody welcomed you on your day one, your onboarding process, and shared the vision, that's already a plus. But a vision is not enough. It's rarely tangible. It's difficult to relate to, and it may sound distant, especially if you're a new person on the team. So in order to make it happen, you really need to walk the talk. You need to make it tangible. You need to make it accessible, and you need to start making plans and then putting them into motion in order to get things done. Because visions outline the broad horizon. They are something that we aspire to, something that we'd really like to achieve, but there's a lot of small steps. Even the longest journey starts with this first one, depending on whether you take it with the left or the right foot. It doesn't really matter in the long run. It's important that you keep moving and keep going and making things happen along the way. So in order to be successful, you need to analyze the problem, use your wits, use your skills, use your competencies, and then joined with other experts, the craftsmen on your team, make things happen. So let me set the scene for this presentation. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a case study, and of course it revolves around the product, the people, and the way we did it. So the product in question here was a multimedia transmission codec living in HDMI ecosystem that would allow smooth interconnectivity of home entertainment or home cinema devices ranging from television sets, set-top boxes, amplifiers, video consoles, and different multimedia dongles. And it was a dual-ended system. On one hand side, we had a professional part for content creators and broadcasters. And on the other hand side, we had a consumer level product that ends up in all of those appliances that I have just mentioned. The team had to be built anew. So even though the product has existed in the market for something like 10 years, we had to take it over and start building the team from scratch. So we started with just 3 people. And then over the course of 2.5 years, the team had grown to 10 people. So I'll touch upon the scaling and growth along the way. So initially, there was just me, and I hired 2 developers and 1 testers to keep things going. The project itself, when I finally found the team members, was set in an agile way because I'm a huge fan of agile software development and all the perks that come along with it. And Scrum turned out to be our weapon of choice. So agility or Scrum itself won't make the cut. In order to be successful, you need to put theory to work. So we know the 5 W's framework. So the first question is why we're doing things. And in the real world, it boils down to the value statement. What kind of difference we're making to the software engineering community, to the consumers out there, be it business to business consumers or users at homes. If you're able to craft a value statement, put it down on paper, and when you read it, it feels like this is something that makes a difference. This is good. You're on the right track. So for us, it was to allow the interconnectivity of all those home devices to simply make it work. You all know that now we have wireless interfaces, cable interfaces. You can basically connect a TV to a soundbar, to amplifier, or maybe vice versa. So this is becoming a complex problem, and most of the users, probably more than 95%, are not engineers. So manufacturers of equipment and software solutions provider cannot count on the fact that everybody's being trained to connect things, and people can easily get lost. So the ease of use when connecting devices can be this value statement. The tangible outcome is the goal you're aiming at. So for us, that was a software kit, a software development kit comprising source code documentation, binaries, and acceptance tests. And that was basically packaged and delivered to our customers online through a customer portal. So the next W is who. So now it's on us. Basically, taking ownership of a technology allows to clear things up, because you can count on yourself, on the team, and there's no way around it. Previously, those could have been other people who were responsible, but now this is all on you, this is all on us, and if we don't do this, who else will? Probably nobody, and the project could get derailed, delayed, or even cancelled, which would be a very undesirable outcome. When even though the principles of agility say that we should be working in increments and add value every iteration, there's business out there, the world, and we need to adjust to make sure that we are hitting the delivery windows. So for equipment manufacturers, it's usually the fall before Christmas that you need to deliver your software. If you miss that spot, if you miss that opportunity window, then probably you need to wait a year. And if you don't monetize on your product for a year, it might be too late if you fail to launch on time. Back in the day, we were still working in office space environments. So this is where we created a piece of calm office space where we could communicate effectively, sit together, draw on the whiteboards, and make the software magic happen. So as you can see, there's the theory and there's the practice. If you connect those two, you're probably bound for success. Many of you have heard the story about bricklayers who get encountered by a passerby asking them what they're doing. One of those guys says that he's just laying bricks, while the other says he's building the cathedral. This might be a cliche, but not so long ago, another story like that was told when there was an inspection at NASA, and one of the directors asked the janitor mopping the floors what he was doing down there. So the answer could have been surprising to some, but for me, it's a great story of purpose, because he said that what they're doing here, they're basically sending rockets to space. So the attitude, the purpose, and the mental framework that you set yourself in are really important for getting things done. We could come to work, do the coding, do the testing, 9 to 5, leave, and forget it. But that's basically not how good teams work, and more engagement is usually beneficial to the whole process. So this is the framework I put together for the sake of this presentation. Since there's a lot in common between civil engineering and software engineering, we have developers, we have architects, and we have all kind of design plans. I thought that it would make sense to create a foundation out of test strategy. The cement would be a team charter, and I'll tell more about that. Define craftsmen, of course, the developers. You might be wondering where the testers are. Well, in Scrum, testers are developers as well, because those are the people who incrementally add value by using their unique skills. So there's no need to differentiate and to build camps, because now that we are together on one boat, we simply need to do our best and code, test, write specification, write documentation, build and deliver. The building blocks, no surprise, we used epics, stories, and tasks to be able to address the granularity of the projects, plan the roadmap, estimate the effort, and be able to track and monitor whether or not we're making the progress towards the goals, if we're going to hit the delivery window or not. And of course, there's this iron project triangle. There's time, there's resources, and there's cost. And there's also a hidden dimension, which is quality that I deeply care about. So if you're not able to manipulate any of those dimensions, then you're probably screwed. But luckily, that's not the case on most of the projects, and there's just enough wiggle room to make things happen and deliver upon the minimum viable product. And all those instructions were encapsulated in a product backlog, which we treated as a single source of truth. Our cathedral, the paramount goal we were working towards, was a software development kit that could be shipped to customers on a given date through a customer portal, and that would ensure very good user experience straight out of the box. All right, so I promised you some recipes, and there was the foundation, the test strategy. But why am I starting with the team chart first? So here's a twist. Before you jump onto work and start coding like crazy, it's good to know your people. It's good to know what their skills are. It's good for them to know you, what principles are guiding you. And the team charter is, for me, from my and my team's experience, a perfect way to address that. So you can see in the picture a mix of things. So there's vision that was mentioned before, processes, of course, those do exist. There are the goals, communication, coordination, resources, authority, but this is not important. What is important is to have a conversation, is to sit down in a room and make it an interactive session. Talk to the guys, find out what the strengths of the team are, what the competencies on the team are, what the skills are, uh, what uh, what are our inputs, what are our outputs, what we can deliver, and what is necessary for the team to operate effectively. My recommendation for the team charter exercise is to go analog, like go full out, use the whiteboard, use the sticky notes. If for some reason, especially during the pandemic, that is not possible, then I would recommend using some online tools, maybe some mind maps or some kind of wiki pages. And the outcome would be best saved in an interactive form. So if you go full analog, you can probably take a photo and maybe print a poster and stick it to the wall of your room or on the next to your office space. But if you go digital and leverage something like Confluence or mind maps, then you can make this a living document and a landing page of your team. So whoever is looking for you, they can go there, find out who you are, what you do, what what you're working with, and what the work products of your efforts are. The good thing is that if you go digital, it's easy to edit what's down there as you go because nothing's carved in stone. I haven't met a single prophet or a crystal ball owner in my professional career yet. If you know somebody, please do let me know because this might be helpful given the uncertainty of our times. But treat the team charter as a road sign, a set of ground rules that you mutually agreed upon and that resonate with all the team members. If there are controversial ideas, don't force them upon other team members because you can only build on agreement and understanding, quite not the opposite. So a good team charter is the glue. This is the cement that will help guide your team through the meanders of different projects, and it will help you build a cathedral, or it will help you send rockets to the moon. It's best done with people you know very well and you can relate to. So a team charter might be a first very good step towards building a team relationship and a team dynamic. Uh, all right, so now that we have the cement in place, so the ingredients are starting to accumulate, we can go and choose the strategy. So just like with Kanban or Scrum, there's no one single method, no one size fits all that will work on every particular project. So if you go to ISTQB syllabus, I recommend using the test manager variety. You can go and see that there are at least 7 different types of test strategy. You can be very analytical and craft a strategy around risks and benefits, which is personally one of my favorite methods. You could go and choose one of the existing models. If your company is following strict processes or standards, you like ISO, IEEE, or whatever works for you, you could use that as a starting point. You could be proactive or reactive depending on what kind of software you're working. If you're developing a web shop that is live all the time, probably you'd really need to be proactive and have everything well tested, because once you click deploy button, it goes live and millions of people can be using your application. If you're working on an good old embedded software with a monolithic architecture, you probably have enough time to get it tested and polished to before the delivery. If you're regression averse, you'd probably want to invest in a lot of automated tests and keep them running in your continuous integration environment. But honestly, there's benefits in all of those approaches, and I would suggest that you do your research, go read the books on test strategy, read the articles. This is not arcane knowledge, it's very digestible, and try to find out what best fits your context. So, what product you're making, how you're making it, why you're making it, and what the tools at hand are available, and then go with the strategy that best suits your team. And again, this is best done as a team effort and in an interactive form. Such a test strategy can be the foundation for all the work. So not necessarily only testing, but also development activities and documentation activities, because software is software. If you treat documentation as software as well, then basically you boil it down to lines of code that land in your repository and can be approached with different kind of tools. So for us, the test strategy has become a central hub for all of our project efforts that led us from a bogged down project with lots of gaps and uncertainties to a great delivery that was very well received by the customers, and there were virtually no bugs left. But that was a process, just to give you a sense of time, that it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen over 2 or 3 sprints. It basically took us 2.5 years and an effort of eventually 10 people to get things work, to straighten them up. But if we did not have the strategy, we would not have achieved that. I think it was President Eisenhower said that a plan is nothing, but planning is everything. So approaching the strategy, thinking long term, trying to foresee what the obstacles along the way might be, is getting you ready for the journey. And I assure you, those journeys are never the same. Every single project I had the privilege to participate in was different. There were different people, different circumstances, and there were different factors we had to take into account. You cannot foresee the future, but you can eliminate the uncertainties by simply writing down what you know and then deriving information from the data you have at hand. So a good strategy is something that will set you for the trip and serve you as road signs along the way on the product roadmap. So if we're talking roadmap, if we're talking goals, something we'd like to achieve, it's important you do this in a meaningful manner. So probably every single one of us has had the misfortune of getting high level corporate goals. For example, contribute to 5% revenue increase. If you're working on a startup, that is probably uh, achievable and understandable. It might be very relevant to the survival of the company. But if you're working in a multinational with thousands and thousands of employees, you might not relate to such a goal, and it may be very distant and doesn't make too much sense. Or it may even be harmful when you think, okay, if I don't do this, I don't get my annual bonus. So I like simple methods, and SMART goals is one of those frameworks that I've been successfully using over the years. So be specific. Don't go with fluffy words like I would like my software to be nice. Try to name nice and replace it with something that can be measured. If you can name it, if you can measure it, probably you can achieve it. But then it's good to check whether this is relevant. If, for example, your embedded software application needs a really nice UI, probably not. But if you're working on a web application that revolves around graphics, that would be quite a different story. And the last part of setting smart goals is setting deadlines, setting timelines, and adhering to those. This is an important factor because even if we're making progress, but the progress is not made in time to get things done, it might be simply too late to launch the product and to be successful in the market. Even if you don't have external deadlines, I strongly advise that you use time boxing and try to set yourselves goals, because on one hand side this will motivate you, and on the other hand side, if you get to that checkpoint, you'll know how much work is left. If you think that a feature can be developed in a month, set that date 1 month ahead and see where you manage to get in those given 4 weeks. If you're 50% there, it means that you're overly optimistic and the whole project might be delayed, and that might require getting back to the drawing board and reassessing what is actually possible. And a really nice way of doing this are the OKRs, a more modern approach, or something that's popular in articles over the last few years. So basically, you use those old good goals and set them as objectives and draw down the key results you'd like to see. So if you want to revolutionize, I don't know, the entertainment industry, what would that mean? There are already so many products that are considered revolutionary. So try to write down the results that you'd like to achieve in a given time and make sure that you apply the smart characteristics to those results. If you if you're living in a huge organization, probably cascading will happen. So there's nothing wrong in taking your boss's objective and making it one of yours, and then trying to see what I could do, what my team could do, what we could do to make this happen. And don't be harsh on yourself. There are different layers of organization and different layers of objectives, and it's not necessarily to contribute to every single one of those. It's much better and much more efficient to focus your efforts and do what you do best, rather than spread yourself thin and basically work on meaningless tasks. If you go down to the details and start working stuff like Eisenhower's matrix, which allows you to choose between urgent and important things, might be a good way forward. And one last thing, set priorities. So not all the goals are born equal, and be specific about that. If you end up with 10 goals and all of them have priority one, probably something's wrong down there. You try to achieve even a standard distribution or a normal distribution of those, then you'll be able to manipulate the project triangle and work along the way without stressing out, because you'll know that if something jumps in, then you have something to sacrifice, because not every feature is as essential as we might have initially thought. All right, so here are the challenges. We start with the first one. This is a very well-known map of Terra Incognita, the New World. 500 years ago, 600 years ago, we didn't know what was out there. And given the complexity of software projects, well, we often still don't know. And that is exactly the case that happened to us. Even though we've had experience working in software industry, that particular product was something new. We've never worked with HDMI transmission. The protocol itself was brand new. We didn't know the software base. We didn't know who wrote the software. So basically, that was an exciting beginning, road into the unknown, and yeah, we had to slay some dragons along the way in order to turn the project around and have the successful delivery at the very end. So don't be afraid and try to write down what you know, what you don't know, and start there by gaining knowledge about the project. So collect information about the people who are still within the organization and you could share the knowledge with you. Try to find the existing documentation, try finding reports. Yes, those good old test reports can be really telling about the product itself and its quality, and then plan for building that knowledge. So for us, it was important to go overseas and get in touch with the people who were originally doing the project. Eventually, it turned out that those were not the founding fathers and people who took it over. So basically, I started getting suspicious that this product might be a hot potato passed on from generation to generation. That made me even more excited because I like difficult challenges and fixing things that are broken. So we set ourselves for success by sending 3 people to do the competence transfer. And of course, money is always an issue. You could have not foreseen that in your budget. You maybe don't even have a budget, but it's good to talk to your manager, asking for the money and outlining the benefits of learning things firsthand, because there's nothing like learning from the master. So for us, the case was that I could send either one engineer for the competence transfer, because back in the day, the hotel rates and planes were crazy, or we could try a different solution. So we looked at Airbnb and were able to rent a 3-room apartment at the cost of a small hotel room. And thanks to those savings, I was able to send all 3 engineers that were able to meet their peers and learn directly from the test lead, from the architect, and from the QA lead. And that turned out to be invaluable because those 2 weeks made a difference like day and night. When we went there, well, actually, I didn't go there because I only sent 3 people. When those guys went there, they didn't know too much about the project, but it turned out that not only did they learn about the intrinsics of the technical solutions and how things are coded, tested, built, delivered, and packaged, but they also formed a relationship. It's always easier to talk to a person that you've met personally rather than just an avatar or an email address that doesn't ring any bells. And it's just the human touch that makes the difference. And then we thought that it would be even better when after a while we could meet those guys once again. So we invited them over to make a joint release already in Wrocław. And we could see that the time spent there was really beneficial, and having done hands-on work for a month gave us a lot of confidence in how we're doing things, and it allowed us to uncover some of the underlying problems that maybe could not be solved during that particular release, but we added that to our plans and we enhanced our strategy on how we'd like to move forward. All right, so the team. So who's doing that? Everybody would like to be on the A team. If you don't recognize those guys, probably you weren't born in the 70s or the 80s. The good news is there's a remake. There are remakes coming every 20 years. So building a great team is always a challenge. So even if you're doing simple tasks, you'd like to be doing those with people you trust and people you can count on. So it is essential to invest in recruitment and finding the right talent. Just to give you some numbers, it took me 5 months to find 5 talented engineers who could join the team. So this is not something that happens just like that in a flash. You really need to invest time. The good thing is you can run many interviews in parallel and make those people come on board on the very same day or maybe in a monthly cadences if their notice period differs. So even if you're looking for a senior engineer, it might take 3 months because this is what their notice period might be. So you get the folks, you have developers, you have testers, you have tech writers. These are basically the competencies that you need. You have the manager who's running the show and could act as a product owner, but then you need to find who the scrum master would be. Some people have experiences with running Scrum, some don't. So choose the person who's really experienced or really keen on doing that. If they live by the values of Scrum and Agile software development, there might be a good match. So you end up with a bunch of new guys. They're new to you, you're new to them. And it's typical that you're going to observe some team dynamics. So there's this framework I like very much, that every team travels from forming, storming, norming to performing and maybe eventually dissolving. And this is the leader's task, to act at each of those stages to make sure that the team is getting closer together rather than apart. This can be done by applying the team charter that was mentioned already before, but basically careful observation is required. And at each of those stages, there are some telltales that can help you make decisions and adjustments. But transparency is probably the key. So if you set the expectations right, if you assign the roles, if you let people know what is expected of them and what the tasks ahead of them are, this is going to be way easier. And given that you took part in the recruitment process and assessed not only the technical competencies and skills of the people you were hiring, but also their convictions, values, and how they would fit a particular organization's culture, you're probably set for success. But remember that it goes both ways. It can be the honeymoon period, it can be the tough struggle. The team might be making progress and working very well together, but if put to a test, it can regress. So be careful about the signals of discontent, people wearing sad faces. If the morale is going down, probably something's wrong and you need to step in as a leader to help the team facilitate the resolution of the problem and maybe take some concrete action. So recruitment, building the team culture based on a team charter, the mutual agreements, ground rules is something of importance and helps remove the elephants from the room. So the good old basics, there's the software development life cycle. You probably all heard of that. But don't forget that every team exists in an ecosystem. There's the company landscape. If your company is using old school methods, some kind of waterfall, or maybe even something else, it doesn't mean that you have to, but you need to adjust. If you're keen on agile software development and maybe you'd like to use Scrum, make sure that you fit in. You can do Scrum, but have external interfaces to allow for smooth communication and cooperation with stakeholders. So for us, it meant that yes, we did have a product owner, a Scrum Master, and a Scrum development team, but we also had roles that were interfaces to a more traditional hierarchical organization. So one of the guys took on the architect's hat, the other became the QA lead, while the most experienced developer became the development lead. That allowed us to not only work as a team, but also work as a part of a broader organization and making sure that the external interfaces of our team were well tested. We never missed a thing, and we were able to communicate the progress of our work effectively. And the last point is autonomy, and I think I can not stress enough how important that is. So we talked in detail about what needs to be done, who needs to do things, why things need to be done, but we haven't touched upon the how part. And this is why you hire great talent. This is why you spend so much time recruiting. You just need to give the space to the people and leave them the autonomy to be creative, to come up with solutions, and to make things happen. But don't mistake me for mixing autonomy with anarchy, because these are not the same things. Having established the ground rules, having team agreements in place, and having the Scrum framework should set you for success on every adventurous journey. Don't be the micromanager. Help your people out instead. Remove the obstacles in their way. Be the servant leader. But we'll touch upon that a little bit later. So the next thing is the legacy code. So we probably all experience those symptoms if we've worked in the industry long enough. The good news is that you can do something about it. And given that you own the development of your product, you can fix the smelly code, you can make it nice, you can refactor it piece by piece. If it's horrible and unusable, you might need to take a decision about rewriting the whole thing, but make it a conscious decisions, then take into account how much time and effort this is going to cost and what is the expected return on that investment. So if you've inherited a product, probably somebody did it. It could have been ancient aliens or Russians or Highlanders. You never know, but does it really matter? It does not, because this is your product, it's your responsibility, and you will be held accountable for what it looks like from this day on forward. And by adding quality into the mix and making this software actually meet business requirements can fix even a really unfavorable reputation. So it turned out that some of the projects I worked on were the laughing stock, but with the help of great people of my team, we managed to turn those dark coals into shiny diamonds, and this is what I strongly advise. Moaning, whining doesn't get you anywhere, but if you get down to the work and fix things on a daily basis and get it done, you can remove all the skeletons from the closet and then be proud about what you achieved, because the more difficult the competition, the more satisfaction in earning the prize. The numbers. The numbers is something that haunts many projects, but be not afraid. Basically, the numbers are your friends. Collect the data that you have and make it work for you. So initially, you don't know what the capacity of your team is unless you start doing things. You can use prior experience and try to assess the the size and complexity of the tasks ahead of you, but actually you never know until you measure it. So use whatever is suitable for you. It can be hours, can be man days. I recommend relative estimations and using story points or t-shirt sizes if you need to look really down the road and try to foresee what's going to happen in 3 years time, or how many features you could get done during the next year. And try to be prudent about your data. So don't do creative accounting, because it's a disservice to the team. It is what it is. If you expected that you'd be able to deliver 100 story points, but you only delivered 50, try to find out what the root cause was, what the reason behind that was, and observe more data points. At least 3 are needed before you can tell if there's a trend or not. The good news is that on every single team I worked with, the velocity stabilized over time. It could be averaged out, and it served us as a really good road sign of how much commitment we can take every single commitment. And it allowed to keep the morale high, because people were not getting burned out by constantly not delivering, but they gained confidence in how much they actually can do in a given time. For us, a 2-week long sprint was really the right thing to do. You could experiment with a week long ones or 4-week long ones, maybe even 6-week long ones, if that's what your organization requires. If you're not working in an agile organization and maybe it has quarterly cycles, well, that's 12 weeks. So you can squeeze in 6 sprints and see how that works for you. Having the data in place allows you to assess the feasibility of imposed deadlines. And as we mentioned before, it's important to hit certain delivery windows in order not to miss the opportunity. Having data will allow you to make conscious decisions about that. And if it's not possible, maybe it's growth that you need. If there's like twice or thrice more the work that you can do, probably you need to start hiring, and start hiring now, because adding people late to the process makes projects even more late. And remember about scaling. So if you have 5 experienced engineers, it's good to mix up the fresh blood with the seasoned engineers. So the next challenge are bugs. Lots of bugs you probably recognize. This is the first ever reported bug that those were infesting us as well. So honestly, I was happy about that, because we found them in bug report systems, and this is how we learned a lot about the product. But we had to put those under control. We organized a number of bug scrub or bug analysis sessions. We tried to find if those could be reproduced, if they still exist. We got lucky a number of times, because some of them got fixed automatically. The rest we had to fix ourselves. But before we jumped the gun and started fixing whatever bugs came first, we made an assessment of severity. We prioritized the work, and we would mix in the maintenance work and the resolution of those bugs into the regular development. That way, there were no maintenance sprints or maintenance periods. There were no people sentenced to maintenance and doom. We basically used that as a to sprinkle the day-to-day business activities, and in between features we would fix bugs. A good practice is to look at the code area that you're currently working on. If there are bugs related to that, you might want to clear them away first in order not to hinder progress, because if there are blocking points, that might put a lot of effort to waste. So I once read a really good piece of advice: before you add speed to your motorboat, make sure you've raised the anchor. Documentation gaps. So that was one of the more difficult parts we faced. It turned out that, except for the customer-facing documentation that we found in the previous versions of the software development kit, there wasn't much left. So we didn't even have the access to previous test reports or release documentation. It was the release notes, and that's it. And when we took a closer look at those, it turned out that there were contradictions between release notes, the code base, and the user documentation. So we had to figure out how to fix that. And we used an unorthodox method. So basically, when the new team member, a junior developer, joined the team, we gave him the documentation and asked him to learn about the system from there. And that was amazing because the guy found like 40 discrepancies and reported them as bugs, and those were not typos. So basically, there were wrong diagrams, there were wrong description of classes and methods and interfaces, folder structures. Basically, so many things were wrong that we couldn't believe that such thing could be actually released. Maybe nobody reads the documentation, but for us, it was really important to figure those things out. And guess what? 2 years later, we had a new layout of the documentation, and there was not a single bug. And we were proud of that. And the smile on our tech writer's face was a testimony to how good of a job we did by joining engineering skills and fine editing capabilities. Yet another challenge we had was the number of test tools and environments. So we had a multi-platform approach with more than 25 combinations. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we implemented a multi-platform continuous integration environment. We revisited the test framework. We dropped the Excel spreadsheet and PHP scripts in favor of Python. We even came up with our own verification and validation tool that then turned out to be a commercially viable product, and who knows, I didn't get to see it, but maybe it will hit the market one day and will also help our customers. And given the nature of our endeavors, we had to face the problems of hardware and software environment testing. Of course, 95% was done in the software world, but when a particular lab was built, we were also able to go there and ask our colleagues if they could run our software on TV set-top boxes, and also got another round of feedback. So as you can probably expect, we had a test diamond rather than a test pyramid, but the good news is that the diamond casts a shadow in the shape of a pyramid, and basically, given the number of problems we had, we could treat this as a greenfield project from testing perspective. So we implemented the unit test framework, and over the years wrote hundreds of test cases using test-driven development approach. We came up with integration testing, functional testing, non-functional testing, measured the performance on all given backends and processor architectures. And at the very top, we revisited the acceptance tests that we had as part of our kit, along with the test signals. We were able to do this all thanks to measuring our progress. So this is an extensive list, but probably there was even more. But what you measure is what you get, and I really like that term, because it ranges from code coverage, which on itself doesn't say much, but if you see blocks of code that have zero coverage, that's probably an area you want to investigate further, and it allowed us to find critical bugs on our API. Technical debt, if you make conscious decisions about it, that's great, but if there's legacy you inherited, you might want to tackle it as well in a structured manner. About the acceptance criteria and ATDD, I already mentioned that. Make sure you have it. Make sure you have signed a contract with the team in form of a definition of done. It really makes things easier if you agree about those upfront. And if you bake the quality in along the way, you are destined for success, because testing itself does not provide quality. It can help you measure it, discover how your project is doing, and be effective. If you want to go fast, make sure you invest in automation, continuous integration, you handle your artifacts appropriately. And above all, use magic spells. There's never enough of please and thank you. And thank you is one of the most powerful recognitions you can use as a manager on the spot. All right. Thank you very much for your attention. I would happily answer your questions.
Thank you so much. So I'll follow up with what you've just said, Krzysztof. So first of all, thank you for your wonderful talk. A lot of great content there. And the second one was please, I guess. So please stay on Discord to answer more questions if they pop up. There is one that someone in the audience would like to ask. So if I may ask you just to answer very briefly. What would be a good source of information about different types of test strategies? Is there a book that you may recommend to read about testing and test strategy?
So I could recommend a series of books by Rex Black that can help you get prepared for the certification by STQB. But if you really want an extract, please go to istqb.org and find the syllabus, the Test Manager Advanced Level. There's really like a 3-pager on test strategy.
Wonderful. Okay, Krzysztof, thank you so much for your insights. This was Krzysztof Chytła talking to us about test strategies.